Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat at the edge, uniform crisp, eyes steady. The room buzzed with voices, maps spread out, hands gesturing, the scrape of boots against concrete. Men spoke over one another, eager to outline contingencies, eager to be heard. She took no notes, no interruptions, no nervous glance toward the clock. Her silence was louder than the noise. But silence here was often mistaken for weakness. The commander's finger jabbed at a red circle on the map. We'll need Overwatch positioned high. Whoever takes the ridge controls the valley. Whoever controls the valley decides whether the convoy makes it back alive. Chairs scraped, heads nodded, no one looked her way. Not yet. She kept her hands folded, a fingertip brushing the frayed edge of her sleeve where the fabric had worn thin. A detail no one noticed. A reminder only she carried. Because the last time she had been called on, truly called on, was the mission where she didn't return with everyone she went in with. The ridge had claimed more than enemies that night. Still, she said nothing. A young lieutenant across the table finally broke the rhythm. What about Alvarez? He didn't even glance at her when he said it, just tossed her name onto the table like it was a stray coin, then kept his eyes on the map. The commander paused, eyes narrowing slightly. His gaze moved across the room, searching until it landed on her. There it was, that moment, the shift in air, the quiet acknowledgement that, despite whispers, despite doubts, despite the invisible weight she carried, there was no one else they trusted with the ridge. Her voice came out steady, "I'll take it." 3 words, that was all. And yet beneath them, more than orders pulsed, more than duty. She was already thinking of the faces that never left her, of a promise made under a different sky, of a letter tucked deep in the lining of her pack. But she didn't let them see that, not yet. The valley stretched far and harsh under morning light. Wind hissed through dry grass, the kind that carried voices away and replaced them with ghosts. She adjusted her rifle, checked the chamber, adjusted again. Rituals drilled into her muscles, so automatic they became prayer. A convoy of vehicles would roll through this corridor at noon. The mission was simple: cover the path, spot movement, neutralize threats. Simple, if war had ever been simple. She settled into position hours early, crawling the last stretch to the ridge until the stone cut against her elbows and the earth filled her lungs. Her world shrank into the scope's circle, glass and steel defining the horizon. And waiting. Patience was both weapon and torment. A hawk circled overhead, screeching once before disappearing into the glare. She envied it, the freedom to leave, the freedom not to care who made it down that road alive. But she was anchored, not by orders, not by the commander's voice echoing in her ear, something deeper, something she had never admitted out loud. Because the ridge had taken someone from her before, someone she couldn't protect. And though she would never confess it to anyone, every mission since had been her way of speaking back to that silence, of refusing to let the land win again. Hours passed, shadows shifted, the sun burned against stone, sweat beaded and dried, beaded again. Her finger rested loose against the trigger guard, breathing slow, steady, measured. She thought of the lieutenant who wouldn't meet her eyes, of the laughter in the mess hall she often passed by, pretending she didn't hear, of the letter in her pack she hadn't unfolded in months. Her heart beat louder than the silence. Movement. Through the scope dust, a shimmer, then figures, dark shapes against pale earth, not the convoy, too early, too careful. Insurgents. 5, maybe 6, then more. Her chest tightened. The convoy wasn't scheduled for another 40 minutes. These men were laying in wait, perfect ambush position. She shifted her scope, tracking their path as they crouched low, weapons ready. They knew exactly where to strike. Her breath slowed, training pressed down on instinct, forcing it into rhythm. Target, assess, adjust. She could take the leader first, disrupt formation, create panic. But something made her pause. One of them, a boy, barely older than 18, fumbling with his rifle. His hands shook. He wasn't ready for this war, but he was already in it. She steadied her aim on him, then moved past, locking onto the leader. The wind changed. A gust carried the scent of dust, sweat, and faint cordite. She closed one eye, exhaled, and pressed. The shot cracked, echoing down the ridge. The leader dropped instantly. Chaos unfolded. Shouts, confusion, scrambling bodies. She chambered again, eyes calm, hands steady. The ambush unraveled under her fire. Two fell, then another. The boy froze, rifle still clutched, eyes wide with terror. He looked around, trapped in a war he couldn't escape. She had the shot, finger against trigger. But she hesitated. Because once, years ago, someone had hesitated for her. The memory surged. A dark night, a different ridge, the voice of someone who saved her by choosing mercy. Someone she never got the chance to thank. She lowered her scope. The boy ran, stumbling down the hill, dropping his weapon as he fled into the dust. The last echo of gunfire faded. Silence returned. But inside her chest, her heart beat with fire, not from orders, not from recognition, from something harder to define. When the convoy finally appeared, the valley was clear. The vehicles rolled steady, engines growling, wheels crushing stone. Soldiers inside leaned heavy against windows, unaware of what had almost happened. She watched them pass. No radio report, no announcement of victory, just her silence, stretched thin between what she had done and what she had chosen not to do. The commander's voice cracked in her earpiece. Alvarez status. Her lips parted, a long pause then. Valley secure. She didn't mention the boy. She didn't mention her hesitation. She didn't mention the way her chest ached when she let him go. Some truths were carried quietly. And as the last vehicle disappeared beyond the bend, she laid her cheek against the rifle stock, staring through the scope at nothing but horizon, and thought of the faces she'd lost. The ones who kept her here. The ones who made silence feel like fire. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The letter. The one folded tight in her pack. The one written by the only person who ever understood why she carried her rifle like a burden, not a weapon. The letter that still waited to be answered. Why did the letter still remain unopened? She stared at it that night in the dim light of a flickering bulb above her cot. The edges had curled over time, softened by sweat, dust, and constant travel. The handwriting on the envelope had faded, but not enough to erase the name written across it. Hers. She should have torn it open months ago, maybe years. But some truths, once read, they could never be returned to silence. She slipped the letter back into the pack before anyone could notice. Around her, the barracks hummed with ordinary life. The clang of boots being unlaced, laughter too loud for the hour, voices trading jokes that covered the weight none of them admitted. She lay still, her breath shallow, pretending to sleep. Sleep, however, did not come. Instead came memory. The ridge, the night it happened. Rain had pounded the earth, drowning every sound except the staccato bursts of fire. Her partner had been beside her then, Miguel. They had trained together, survived together, laughed when laughter felt impossible. He had been the one who told her patience wasn't silence, it was strength. He had been the one who, on nights when their rifles felt like anchors, whispered stories of home to remind her what they were fighting for. And he had been the one who never made it back. The letter had arrived weeks after his death. She couldn't bring herself to read it, because to read it meant finality. To read it meant acknowledging he wasn't walking back through those doors. So she carried it instead. A weight, a reminder, a promise she didn't understand yet. Morning brought new orders. She moved wordlessly through routine, lacing boots, cleaning her rifle, running hands along cool steel. The convoy had survived yesterday because of her, though no one spoke it aloud. But silence was enough. She didn't need recognition. She needed something else. The commander entered, jaw tight, eyes dark with fatigue. A map rolled out across the table. Fingers tapped at red lines drawn too hastily. Insurgents are shifting east. Intelligence says they're moving supplies through the canyon. If that route stays open, the valley, lost. His eyes lifted, sweeping the room. We can't let that happen. Murmurs rose. No one volunteered. Her hand tightened against her thigh. The canyon, high walls, narrow passages, no clean sightlines, no escape, a sniper's nightmare. And yet she spoke. "I'll go." The room quieted. Her voice didn't tremble, her heart did. Because she knew why she volunteered. Not orders, not strategy, not recognition. Redemption. The commander nodded slowly as though he understood something unspoken. "You won't go alone. Martinez will join you, and Davis." He hesitated, then added, "It's dangerous. If things shift south, extraction may not be possible." She only nodded. She was already prepared for that truth. The canyon smelled of stone and silence. Their boots sank into dust, crunching softly, swallowed quickly by walls that rose sharp into the sky. The sun cut narrow slices of light, painting their faces in alternating shadows. Every sound carried too far, every step, every breath. Martinez walked ahead, scanning corners with his rifle. Davis kept close, his eyes darting, too quick, too restless. "You ever think about what happens if we don't come back?" Davis asked, voice cracking against stone. Martinez snorted. "You don't think, you do." Alvarez said nothing. She adjusted the strap on her pack, fingers brushing against the hidden letter. Her silence made Davis glance back at her, brow furrowed. "You never talk much, do you?" he muttered. She looked past him at the canyon walls. "Talking doesn't keep you alive." Martinez chuckled. "That's Alvarez, always sharp, always cold." Cold. If only they knew the fire that burned in her chest. The canyon narrowed. Rocks jutted sharp, crevices deep enough to hide shadows. Then movement. A sound too quick, too light, pebbles tumbling down. Her hand shot up, signaling halt. Silence. The wind shifted. Dust carried faint scents, sweat, smoke, oil. They weren't alone. Voices echoed, foreign, rough. Martinez dropped low, eyes scanning. "Ambush," he mouthed. Her pulse slowed, though her chest tightened. She brought her rifle up, pressing cheek against stock, glass circling the walls. Shapes flickered, men crouching above, rifles angled down. "Too many." Davis whispered, panicked. "We can't take them all." He was right. A firefight here was death. Options flickered. Retreat meant being gunned down. Advancing meant running straight into their fire. Unless... Her eyes traced the rock face, studying shadows, distances, angles. Then she saw it, a ledge higher up, barely visible, reachable if one climbed fast and silent. From there she could see the enemy clearly, control the canyon. She turned to Martinez. "Cover me." His eyes widened. "You'll be exposed." "I'll make it." She didn't wait for his argument. The climb burned her muscles. Stone tore her palms, boots slipped, dust filled her throat. Each pull was a gamble, too loud, too slow, too desperate. Voices above grew louder. Rifles shifted. Shadows leaned over the ledge. Her chest screamed for air. Her heart hammered. She thought of Miguel, of his voice telling her patience was strength, of his laughter that made even silence bearable. She climbed faster. Hands gripped the edge. Muscles strained. She pulled herself up just as one insurgent turned, rifle in hand. For a fraction of a second their eyes locked. His widened in shock. She fired. The shot cracked, reverberating off canyon walls. Chaos erupted, shouts, bullets slicing air, sparks snapping against rock. She dropped low, pressing cheek to stock, scope narrowing the chaos. One target fell, then another. Martinez and Davis opened fire from below, bullets hammering upward. But numbers pressed hard. Shadows kept coming. And then a sound that cut her breath short. A scream. Davis. She swung her scope downward. He was on the ground, clutching his side, blood soaking dust. Martinez knelt beside him, firing upward with one hand, pulling Davis with the other. Her chest clenched. Choices, always choices. She could keep firing, thinning the ambush, protecting the mission. Or she could climb down, help them, risk everything. Her finger hovered on the trigger, breath shallow. The letter in her pack burned against her spine. Miguel's letter, his words she had never read. Words she feared might demand something of her, something she hadn't yet given. Her eyes shut for a second, then opened. And she turned the rifle back on the enemy. Because the only way Davis lived was if she kept them all from being overrun. The firefight stretched endless. Minutes bled into eternity. She moved like stone and wind, steady, sharp, unrelenting, each shot precise, each breath measured. Her world narrowed to the circle of the scope, the crack of the rifle, the dust rising with every fall. Until silence returned. Slow, heavy, final. Bodies lay scattered across rock, smoke curled faintly, the canyon breathed quiet again. She lowered the rifle, arms trembling, breath ragged. Below, Martinez dragged Davis against the wall, hands pressing cloth against the wound. Davis was pale, lips shaking. I'm not gonna make it. Yes, you are, Martinez snapped, voice fierce, desperate. Alvarez slid down from the ledge, boots scraping stone, dropping to her knees beside them. She pressed her own hands against the wound, ignoring the blood seeping between her fingers. You're going to live, she whispered. Davis met her eyes. For the first time he saw past the silence, past the cold. He saw the fire. And in that fire she saw Miguel. Her chest broke open. Hours later the extraction bird thumped overhead. Blades whipped dust into the air, drowning the canyon in thunder. Davis was lifted onto the stretcher, Martinez climbing in beside him, face grim, exhausted. She stood apart, rifle slung across her shoulder, blood drying against her sleeves. The commander's voice crackled in her earpiece. Alvarez, report. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth, that the canyon had nearly swallowed them whole, that she had chosen fire over mercy, that every shot she fired tonight weighed heavier than the last. But she only said, route secure. Because the rest wasn't for him to know. As the bird lifted off, carrying Davis into the sky, she touched the pack at her side, felt the outline of the letter. Someday she would open it. But not tonight. Not yet. Because she feared that inside, the words might demand something she wasn't ready to give. And she wasn't sure how much fire her heart had left. Why did she keep seeing his face in every silence? Days passed after the canyon. Davis survived, barely. Martinez had stayed by his side, fierce as a brother, while Alvarez kept her distance. She wasn't built for bedside vigils. She wasn't built for comforting words or promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she walked. The base perimeter at night was wrapped in strange quiet. Beyond the fences stretched emptiness, dunes, mountains, shadows that shifted with the wind. She let her boots carry her in circles, gravel crunching faint beneath each step. A guard tower's spotlight swept across the earth every few minutes, catching dust in its glow before darkness reclaimed it. She carried the rifle as always, though no orders called for it. Without it, her hands felt naked. And in her pack, the letter rested, pressing against her spine like a secret spine of its own. She stopped beneath the shadow of a hangar, chest heaving with the weight of a thought she couldn't push away anymore. Why hadn't she read it? Fear, that was the truth. Not fear of what it said, but of what it demanded. Because if Miguel's words reminded her of love, she'd have to admit she still carried it. If they reminded her of duty, she'd have to admit she might never finish paying it. And if they reminded her of regret. She closed her eyes, fists curling tight. The desert air smelled of fuel and iron. Somewhere an engine hummed, then went silent. She almost pulled the letter out, almost tore the seal. But then a voice broke the moment. "You never stop moving, do you?" She turned. It was Martinez, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. His face was drawn, eyes lined with exhaustion. "You watching me?" she asked. "Watching? No. Wondering? Yeah," he shrugged. "The way you move, it's like if you stop, something catches up." She didn't answer. He pushed off the wall, stepped closer. "Davis asked about you today." Her chest tightened. "Why?" "Said he remembered your hands keeping him alive in that canyon. Said you're not as cold as people think." A flicker passed through her. She masked it quickly, looking away. Martinez's voice softened. "He's right, you carry something, more than orders, more than the job." Her jaw clenched. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't try to know me." Martinez studied her a moment, then nodded quietly. "Fair." He walked past, boots scuffing gravel, and disappeared into the shadows. She stood there long after, the letter still unopened, her chest heavier than before. The next mission came faster than she expected. A supply line had been cut north of the valley. Local fighters had raided convoys, leaving no survivors. Command wanted eyes on the mountains, sharp eyes. Alvarez. She didn't argue, she didn't volunteer either. She simply accepted because resistance was pointless. Orders filled silence. Silence filled her fire. This time it wasn't just Martinez at her side. A small team of 6. New faces, nervous ones. Men and women who whispered about her reputation in corners thinking she didn't hear. Some called her the ghost, others the ice. She ignored it. The mountains loomed cold when they arrived. Thin air, sharp wind, cliffs painted in pale stone. Snow clung to shadows even in late season, crunching beneath their boots. The mission was observation, track movement, report routes. No direct engagement unless forced. But nothing in war ever stayed clean. The second night on the ridge, fog rolled in. Visibility shrank. The team huddled in a shallow outcrop, radios quiet, nerves tighter than triggers. One of the new recruits, a boy named Carter, sat closest to her, barely 20, eyes too wide, too green. "You ever get used to it?" he whispered. She looked at him. Used to what? The waiting, the not knowing if something, watching back. Her gaze shifted to the fog. She could almost see shapes moving inside it, though she knew it was imagination, or hoped it was. "You don't get used to it," she said. "You just carry it." Carter nodded slowly, as if those words carved themselves into him. His hands trembled slightly on his rifle. He wasn't ready for this. None of them had been once. But war didn't wait for readiness. The crack of a shot shattered the fog. Everyone dropped low, hearts leaping into throats. Another shot, then another. The sound bounced hard against stone, impossible to pinpoint. Martinez hissed, "Sniper." Alvarez's blood went cold. The team scattered tighter into cover, dust kicking around them, stones splintering. Carter froze, too slow, eyes wide. Alvarez lunged, shoving him down as a bullet carved sparks off the rock where his head had been. She pressed him flat, chest against dust, whispering sharp, "Breathe." His breaths came ragged, broken. The fog thickened. The sniper's vantage was higher, better, whoever it was experienced, patient. Her mind spun. This wasn't random fire, this was hunting. She crawled inch by inch, pulling her scope up, eyes narrowing through glass. Fog blurred edges. Shadows bled into shapes. But she caught a flicker, movement against pale stone, the glint of a scope catching faint light. There. Her chest slowed, her breathing steadied, she locked in. The wind shifted, cutting cold across her cheek. The world shrank to the circle of her scope. But just as she was about to fire, she froze. Because in the shape, in the silhouette, she saw Miguel. Her body trembled. Her eye blinked hard, breaking focus. Her brain screamed it was impossible, her heart screamed it was. The shot cracked before she could steady again. Stone exploded inches from her hand. She rolled, heart hammering, dragging Carter tighter against cover. Martinez shouted through the fog, "Alvarez, you see them." Her mouth opened, no words came, because she didn't know what she saw. The firefight dragged the night long. The enemy sniper pressed, ruthless, herding them into corners, keeping them pinned. Every attempt at counterfire fell short. One of the recruits, Jin, caught a bullet through the leg, muffling screams against his sleeve. They couldn't move, couldn't retreat. Alvarez pressed her head back against Stone, heart pounding louder than gunfire. That silhouette lingered in her mind, that impossible resemblance. She reached for her pack, fingers brushing the letter. For a moment, she considered tearing it open right there, in the middle of fog and fire. Maybe the words inside would tell her something. Maybe Miguel's voice would guide her again. But no, not yet. She shoved it back, chambered around, forced her breathing still. Patience, strength. The sniper waited, so would she. Hours bled, the fog thinned, dawn broke pale and cold. And when the light finally cut through, Alvarez saw clearly. The sniper was real, flesh and blood. A scarred man crouched against Stone, eyes hard, rifle sharp, not Miguel, not a ghost. But for one terrible night, her heart had convinced her otherwise. And the fear lingered, that maybe her silence, her fire, wasn't enough to carry her forever. By sunrise, the team held their ground. Reinforcements finally reached them, driving the sniper into retreat. Jin was evacuated. Carter survived, pale and shaken, but alive. Martinez approached her as they packed up, his eyes sharp. What happened out there? She kept her hand steady, rifle slung over her shoulder. Enemy sniper, nothing more. He studied her. You hesitated. Her breath caught. I didn't. But the look in his eyes said he knew. And when she turned away, the letter in her pack felt heavier than ever. Because soon she would have no choice but to read it. And when she did, everything might change. Why did her hands shake, more holding paper than holding a rifle? The barracks were quiet that night. Martinez had gone to the medical tent to check on Davis. Carter was asleep in the corner, his chest rising unevenly, dreams no doubt haunted by the sniper's fire. The others were scattered across base, voices carrying faintly through thin walls. Alvarez sat alone on her cot, the letter in her lap. For weeks, months, she had carried it like an unspoken oath. For weeks, it had been easier to face bullets than to face ink. But the image of the silhouette in the fog wouldn't leave her. The way she had seen Miguel where he was. The way she had hesitated, just for a second, because her heart wanted ghosts to be real. Her fingers traced the seal. It had been pressed tight by someone's careful hand. His hand, Miguel. The silence deepened. She tore it open. The first line blurred before her eyes. She blinked hard, steadying breath, forcing her chest to quiet. The words swam into focus. Alvarez. If you're reading this, then I didn't make it back. Her heart caved inward. She pressed the paper against her chest, crushing it briefly, as if she could undo the words by refusing to see them. But slowly, carefully, she smoothed it out again. I don't want you to carry this as guilt. You'll try, I know you. You'll blame yourself for something you couldn't stop. But hear me. My choice to be there, my choice to fight, it was mine. You don't carry it. Her throat tightened. Every syllable landed like stone against bone. You once told me silence was your curse, that you didn't know how to speak when the weight got too heavy, that maybe no one would ever hear you. I want you to know I heard you. Every day, every mission. Even when you said nothing, I knew what you carried. Her breath shook. She folded the letter halfway, covering the rest with her palm. Her eyes burned, though no tears came. She hadn't cried in years, not since, no. She forced herself forward, peeling her hand back, letting the next words surface. If the war keeps you breathing, don't let it take your heart. Don't let the fire inside you turn cold. Use it. For me, for them, for you. She stopped again, pressing her forehead into her hand. Images surged. Miguel's grin as he handed her an energy bar on a 12-hour overwatch, his steady hand guiding hers during training, his voice telling her patience was strength. Now his voice lived only in ink. She folded the letter carefully, slid it back into its envelope, and tucked it deep into her pack. Not because she was finished with it, but because she wasn't ready for the last lines. Not yet. The thought of what more he might have written terrified her, because if the first half already broke her chest open, the rest might shatter it completely. And she still had a mission. The mission came sooner than expected. Insurgents had regrouped after the canyon and the mountains. Intelligence pointed to a planned strike on a village south of the valley, one that had sheltered Allied forces before. Families, children, people who had already lost too much. Command wanted eyes on it. If the threat was real, they'd intervene. Alvarez volunteered before anyone else spoke. The commander didn't argue. He only gave her the coordinates, his eyes flicking briefly to hers with something unreadable. Perhaps trust, perhaps concern. She didn't care which. The village sat quiet at dusk, roofs sloping low, smoke curling thin from a few stoves. Goats wandered near the edge of the road, bells tinkling softly. Children chased one another between houses, their laughter cutting against the silence of mountains. Alvarez lay prone on a ridge above, scope fixed on the horizon. Martinez crouched nearby, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Carter sat a few feet back, chewing on nerves more than rations. "Doesn't feel right," Martinez muttered. It didn't. The silence was too clean, the air too still. Alvarez adjusted her scope, a flicker, movement at the tree line, shadows where shadows shouldn't be. Then trucks. Dark, heavy, headlights off, rolling toward the village like silent predators. Her chest tightened. She spoke into the radio, voice steady. "This is Alvarez, confirming hostiles inbound, multiple trucks, armed." Command's response was clipped cold. "Hold position, reinforcements en route, do not engage unless fired upon." Martinez cursed under his breath. "By the time reinforcements get here, it'll be over." Alvarez's finger tightened near the trigger guard. Through the scope, she saw faces, hard, ruthless, ready. Men unloading from the trucks, weapons slung, spreading toward the homes. Children still played in the street. Her breath caught. Orders said wait, but orders didn't live here. Orders didn't breathe this air, didn't hear those children's laughter, didn't see the way mothers pulled them back into doorways, sensing the danger too late. "Alvarez," Martinez hissed, "what do we do?" Her eye stayed on the scope. The world narrowed to one figure stepping forward, rifle raised toward a door where a child had just disappeared. "Patience, strength." Miguel's words burned in her ears. "Don't let the fire turn cold." She exhaled and fired. The first shot dropped the lead fighter instantly. The others shouted, chaos rippling. Some scrambled for cover, others fired wildly toward the ridge. Bullets carved stone, sparks snapping. Carter ducked low, hands over his helmet. Martinez fired bursts beside her, pushing them back. The village erupted in screams. Mothers pulled children into basements, doors slammed. Goats scattered, bells clanging sharp in the dark. Through her scope, Alvarez worked with calm precision, one target at a time, quick, steady, relentless. But there were too many. For every one she dropped, two more pushed forward. The trucks emptied. Gunfire rattled through the streets, windows shattered, dust clouds rising. Martinez shouted over the chaos, "We can't hold them." Carter's voice broke, panicked, "They'll kill everyone." Alvarez's chest heaved. She wanted to believe reinforcements would come, that orders would save them. But her scope showed the truth. If she stopped firing, the village would drown in blood before help ever arrived. And so she kept firing. Her hands shook only when she reloaded. Time blurred, the battle stretched endless. Villagers screamed, soldiers shouted, bullets carved the night. Then finally rotor blades. The thunder of helicopters ripped the sky. Searchlights cut across the streets, blinding the fighters, scattering them in panic. Reinforcements stormed down ropes, rifles barking. Within minutes, the tide shifted. Alvarez lowered her rifle, arms trembling, chest raw. The village stood shaken, scarred but alive. Children clung to mothers. Smoke curled from broken windows. Goats bleated nervously. And Alvarez lay on the ridge, staring through the scope at nothing, her heart pounding like it would never stop. Later in the barracks, she pulled the letter out again. Her hands were steadier this time. She unfolded it, eyes tracing the words she hadn't yet read. If you doubt yourself, remember this. Your silence is not emptiness. It's where you carry all of us. The ones who can't come back. The ones who leave pieces of themselves behind. You carry us in your fire. Her breath caught. Don't let that fire consume you. Let it guide you. And when it's too heavy, when the silence feels like it's breaking you, promise me you won't face it alone. Her throat closed. The words blurred again, but not from dust this time. She pressed the paper flat, hands trembling. Promise. But who was left to promise? The barracks hummed faintly outside her corner. Carter's quiet snores. Martinez's heavy boots packing somewhere in the dark. She closed her eyes, the words echoing. Don't face it alone. And for the first time she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Miguel had been right. The village smelled of smoke and fear. It was dawn now. Pale light bled over the mountains, touching rooftops cracked by gunfire, painting the dust-strewn streets in muted gold. Children clung to their mothers, eyes wide, red from crying. Men picked through the rubble, pulling splintered wood from doorways, kicking away shards of glass. Alvarez moved among them like a shadow. Her rifle slung low, helmet tucked under one arm. She had the strange, unwelcome feeling of being both savior and stranger. Everywhere she turned, she saw the same look, gratitude mixed with something else, something raw. Not thank you. Not we're saved. Something quieter, heavier. The look of people who would never forget what it had cost. A woman caught her eye. Older, scarf wrapped tight, dirt streaking her face. In her arms, a boy no older than 8, his cheek pressed against her shoulder. He peeked out at Alvarez, eyes searching. She froze. His stare reminded her of Miguel's words, "You carry us in your fire." The boy blinked. She thought he might smile, but instead, he buried his face back into his mother's scarf. Alvarez turned away, chest tight. They set up camp on the edge of the village. Reinforcements stayed behind to secure the streets, medics moving from house to house, bandaging wounds, checking on shaken families. Helicopters thudded overhead, delivering supplies, extracting the dead. The dead. She hadn't let herself think about that yet. Now walking past the square she saw them, bodies covered with cloth lined against a wall. Villagers, fighters, both. Martinez stood nearby, jaw set, hands clenched behind his back. Carter sat on a broken bench, helmet off, staring at the ground as if it might open beneath him. Hell of a night, Martinez said quietly when she approached. She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the line of bodies. He followed her gaze. You saved a lot more than you lost. She wanted to believe that, wanted to let it be enough. But all she saw were the still forms under cloth. All she heard were the shots she hadn't fired fast enough. Martinez sighed heavy. You did what had to be done. Don't let yourself drown in it. Her jaw tightened. And if drowning is the only way to feel it. He looked at her then, eyes narrowing, studying her like he could see the cracks forming. Careful, Alvarez, he murmured. The silence can eat you alive. That night she couldn't sleep. The barracks was replaced by a small hut, hastily cleared for soldiers. Carter snored in a corner, restless. Martinez cleaned his weapon by lantern light, each movement sharp, practiced. Alvarez sat cross-legged on her cot, the letter in her lap again. The paper was worn now, creased from folding and unfolding. Her thumb brushed the edges. Her chest ached with a familiar dread, the next words. She hadn't yet reached the end. And part of her didn't want to. Because what if the last line was a goodbye too heavy to carry? But she unfolded it anyway. If you're afraid of being alone, remember this. None of us walk out of the silence by ourselves. Not me, not you. Find someone to hear you when you can't hear yourself. Don't shut them out. She froze. Her eyes drifted to Martinez, still cleaning his rifle. His jaw was set, his eyes tired. He looked like a man carrying his own ghosts. She thought of Carter, trembling, trying to be brave but cracking at the seams. She thought of the villagers, their stares, their silent gratitude. And she thought of herself, rifle steady, hands strong but heart cracking open piece by piece. She pressed the letter flat against her knees. Don't shut them out. But letting anyone in felt like letting go of Miguel. And that she wasn't ready for. The next morning, command sent them out again. Not far, just a sweep of the surrounding valleys to make sure no other groups lingered. Simple on paper. But Alvarez had learned nothing was simple anymore. They moved in silence, boots crunching over frost-hardened soil. The air was thin, each breath sharp. The sun was high, but the cold clung stubbornly to their skin. Carter walked between them, jittery, his rifle bouncing awkwardly with each step. His eyes flicked constantly to the ridges, the trees, the shadows. Martinez stayed calm, scanning steady. Alvarez drifted behind, every sound amplified. The wind, the gravel, the distant call of a bird. Then something else. A rustle, a crack. She froze. Martinez lifted a fist, signaling halt. Carter nearly tripped, stopping, his breath catching. The silence thickened. Alvarez raised her scope, eyes narrowing toward the tree line. Movement, figures, watching. Not villagers, not friendly. She exhaled slowly, finger brushing the trigger guard. One figure stepped forward, armed, masked. Her heart pounded, Miguel's words echoing like a drumbeat. Don't shut them out. But she didn't have time to open her heart. Not here, not now. Here she only had time to fire. The fight was fast, brutal. Gunfire cracked through the valley, echoing like thunder. Carter fired wildly. Martinez barked orders. Alvarez moved with cold precision. They pushed back wave after wave, but the figures were many, too many. Martinez's shout cut through the chaos, flank left. Alvarez moved, scope up, dropping 2 fighters before they reached cover. Carter stumbled, nearly falling, but Martinez dragged him upright, firing without pause. Her ears rang, her chest burned, her arms ached, but she didn't stop. Because stopping meant silence. And silence was death. By the time it ended, the ground was littered with bodies. Smoke drifted. The air stank of cordite and blood. Carter sat hard on the dirt, gasping, his face pale. Martinez crouched beside him, checking his arm where a bullet had grazed. Alvarez stood alone, rifle hanging limp at her side. Her breath came ragged, but her hands didn't shake. Not yet. She looked up at the sky, pale and endless. Somewhere, she imagined, Miguel's voice lingered. Don't face it alone. Her eyes closed. For just a second, she let herself believe he was right. But when she opened them again, all she saw was the valley, scarred and broken. And all she felt was the fire still burning in her chest. A fire she wasn't sure she could control. Why did Martinez keep staring at her? The mission was over. The valley was behind them, the gunfire already a memory carried on smoke. They trudged back to the village in silence, boots heavy, weapons dragging against straps, but Alvarez could feel it. His gaze. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even angry. It was knowing. and knowing was worse than hate. The village received them with relief that was too loud for her ears. Children ran to the soldiers, clinging to Carter's legs, offering dried bread and smiles through soot-streaked faces. Women poured water into tin cups, pressing them into Martinez's hands, whispering prayers in voices still shaking from grief. Alvarez stood apart. She watched Carter bend to accept a flower from a girl no older than 6, watched Martinez laugh softly with a boy who tugged at his sleeve. Her chest tightened. That should have been enough to warm her, to remind her of what they were fighting for. But instead it burned, because when she looked at their faces, she saw Miguel. And when she looked at herself, she saw nothing at all. That night the three of them shared a hut. Small, low ceiling, the smell of smoke soaked into the mud walls. A single lantern flickered on a crate, shadows dancing across their faces. Carter sat with his knees pulled tight to his chest, staring at the floor. His lips pressed together as if he were holding something back. His hands shook, not from cold but from memory. Martinez leaned against the far wall, cleaning his rifle with sharp, practiced motions. Each click of metal against metal echoed louder than it should. Alvarez sat across from them, back straight, helmet in her lap, the letter hidden inside her jacket. She pretended not to feel its weight. The silence stretched long. Finally, Carter spoke. "I can't get their faces out of my head." Martinez looked up. "The fighters." Carter shook his head, swallowing hard. "The ones behind them, the villagers, the women, the kids, they were watching us fight, watching us kill, like," his voice cracked, "like we're not saving them, like we're just teaching them how to lose." His words sank deep. Alvarez wanted to tell him he was wrong, that their presence mattered, that their actions meant something. But when she opened her mouth, nothing came. Because wasn't he right? Martinez set the rifle down. His voice was calm but weighted. "You're not wrong. They've lost too much already, but they're still here, and that matters." Carter didn't respond. His eyes glistened in the lantern light. Martinez's gaze shifted to Alvarez. "And what about you?" he asked quietly. Her chest froze. "What about me? You've barely said a word since the firefight. You move like a machine, you shoot like one too. But the second it's over, you shut down, like none of this touches you." Her hands curled tighter around her helmet. "It doesn't matter how it touches me. What matters is the job." Martinez leaned forward, eyes sharp now. "That's not true, and you know it." Her throat tightened. "You don't know me." "I'm trying to," he snapped, then lowered his voice quickly, mindful of Carter. "I've been trying to, but you keep building walls higher than the mountains we fight in." The words cut deeper than she expected. Her hand brushed her jacket, Miguel's letter beneath the fabric. His words echoed again, "Don't shut them out." Her silence stretched too long. Finally, Martinez shook his head, looking away. "Keep shutting us out, Alvarez, but don't pretend it isn't breaking you." The lantern flickered. Carter buried his face into his arms. Martinez went back to his rifle. And Alvarez sat there, rigid, the fire inside her burning hotter than ever, because part of her knew he was right. The next morning, Carter didn't eat. He stood outside the hut, staring at the mountains, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Alvarez approached, boots crunching in the dirt. "You should eat something." He didn't look at her, not hungry. She studied him, the boy who had nearly died in the fog, the boy who carried ghosts already heavier than his frame. "You can't run on empty," she said softly. He turned then, eyes red. "How do you do it?" Her chest tightened. "Do what?" "Carry it, the faces, the weight." Her throat caught. For a moment, she almost gave him Miguel's words, almost offered him the fire she herself was still afraid of. But the silence wrapped tighter. And instead, she said, "You don't think about it." His face fell, he looked away. And in that moment, Alvarez hated herself. Later that day, they patrolled again. The air was thin, the wind sharper than knives. The land stretched empty around them, each shadow a question mark. Carter dragged his feet, too quiet. Martinez kept glancing between him and Alvarez, his jaw grinding tighter with every step. Finally, Martinez pulled her aside. "What are you doing to him?" She bristled, "Nothing." "That's the problem." She frowned. Martinez's voice sharpened. "He's falling apart. You see it, I see it. And you, of all people, know what it's like to carry too much silence, yet you let him drown." Her teeth clenched, the fire in her chest roared. "I am not responsible for him." "Yes, you are," Martinez shot back. "We all are. That's what this is, this uniform, this mission. Responsibility for each other, for the ones who can't carry it alone." She flinched, because those words, responsibility, carrying, cut too close to Miguel's letter. Her silence stretched too long. Martinez shook his head, stepping back. His voice dropped, almost broken. "You think you're protecting yourself, but you're just burning the rest of us alive." He walked away before she could answer. Alvarez stood frozen, the fire inside her twisting into something darker. That night she finally read the end of the letter. Her hands shook as she unfolded the final crease, lantern light flickering across Miguel's handwriting. "When the silence feels heavier than the rifle in your hands, remember this. You don't have to carry it alone. Let someone else hold a piece of it, even if it scares you, especially if it scares you. Because love, whether for a person or for a country, was never meant to be endured alone. It was meant to be shared." Her chest cracked. Tears she hadn't felt in years blurred the ink. Her body trembled, as if the weight of every ghost she'd carried alone finally pressed down at once. She pressed the letter to her chest, her breath ragged. For the first time, she whispered into the silence, "I don't know how." But the silence gave no answer. Only the sound of Carter's restless tossing. Only the steady breath of Martinez, pretending to sleep. Only her own heart, beating against fire that refused to dim. At dawn, command gave them new orders. A larger operation, a stronghold in the cliffs where enemy leaders were rumored to hide. High risk, high stakes. Martinez strapped his gear in silence. Carter's hands shook as he loaded magazines. Alvarez folded Miguel's letter, slid it carefully back into her jacket. This time she knew. If she didn't find a way to share the fire inside her, it wouldn't just consume her. It would consume them all. Why did the air feel so thin? The helicopters cut low across the valley, rotors thrumming like thunder against the mountainsides. Inside, the team sat strapped and silent, faces pale in the red interior lights. Martinez's jaw worked tight, his rifle steady across his knees. Carter's hands clutched his pack straps, knuckles white, lips pressed so hard they'd gone colorless. Alvarez sat still. Her helmet rested against the vibrating wall, eyes half closed, but she wasn't resting. Her thoughts spun. She could feel the letter pressed inside her jacket, Miguel's last words folded close to her chest. "You don't have to carry it alone." But she hadn't shared it, not with Martinez, not with Carter, not with anyone. And now, heading toward the cliffs where the enemy waited, she wondered if her silence would kill them. The stronghold was a jagged wound carved into the cliffs, stone ridges, crude bunkers, narrow choke points. From above, it looked abandoned. From the ground, it smelled of danger. They set down a half-mile out, boots sinking into loose gravel, air sharp with cold. The cliffs towered ahead, streaked with snow and shadow. Martinez gave the order, "Stay tight, eyes everywhere." The team moved in. Every step scraped against stone, every sound echoed too far. The silence wasn't silence at all, it was a presence, watching, waiting. Carter's breathing grew uneven. Alvarez kept her eyes forward, scope sweeping ridges, finger brushing the trigger guard. She remembered Miguel's words again, sharp as glass. "Find someone to hear you when you can't hear yourself." But she didn't speak, couldn't. The cliffs swallowed them whole. The ambush came fast. Gunfire erupted from above, sharp cracks splitting the air, bullets sparking against rock. Shouts echoed from hidden bunkers, shadows spilling across the ridges. "Cover," Martinez roared. The team scattered, diving behind boulders, weapons firing back in desperate bursts. Carter tripped, stumbled. Alvarez grabbed his pack and yanked him down just as a round snapped past his head. His eyes were wild. "We're surrounded." "Breathe," she snapped, her voice a whip. "Find your sights." But his hands shook too hard. His shots went wide. Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. "We push left, Alvarez cover." She lifted her scope, steady hands against shaking earth, breath slowing into razor focus. 3 targets dropped, one after the other, their bodies tumbling against stone. But for everyone she silenced, 2 more voices rose. The cliffs became a furnace of sound, gunfire, ricochets, shouts in a language she didn't understand. Dust clouded the air. The team pressed tight against cover, pinned. Martinez crawled close, shouting over the roar. "We're stuck here, we need a way out." Alvarez's eyes scanned the stone above. Her pulse thudded. Her silence threatened to choke her. Carter was shaking beside her, firing blind. His voice broke. "We're not getting out of here." Alvarez grabbed his wrist, forcing his rifle steady. "Look at me." His eyes met hers, wild, panicked. "You're not alone," she said. The words tore out of her like a wound opening. "Do you hear me? You're not alone." For a moment his breath caught. His trembling eased just enough. His next shot landed true. Alvarez's chest ached, because the fire inside her, the silence she'd guarded so fiercely, had just broken, and it had steadied him. But breaking silence came with cost. A rocket screamed down from the cliffs, slamming against the boulder above. Stone exploded, dust choking, earth shaking. The shockwave threw Carter onto his back, Martinez against the wall, Alvarez to her knees. Her ears rang, her vision swam. Through the haze, she saw Martinez crawling toward Carter, shielding him with his own body. His shout barely reached her. "We can't hold this." Alvarez blinked, grit from her eyes, her hands finding the rifle again. And then, for the first time since Miguel's death, she prayed. Not for herself, not even for survival, but for them. She found her target high on the ridge, shoulder propped on stone, launcher steady. Her scope locked, her breath froze, the world narrowed. The shot cracked. The figure dropped, the launcher clattered, useless. The valley stilled for half a second. Then Martinez was shouting, "Now move." The team surged left, scrambling over rocks, Alvarez firing cover with every step. Carter stumbled but stayed upright. Martinez kept him moving, one hand on his pack, one firing without pause. They climbed, sweat freezing against their skin, lungs burning in the thin air. Bullets chased them, chipped stone at their heels, but they didn't stop. Couldn't. At the ridge's lip, Martinez shoved Carter up first. Alvarez covered, then pulled herself over last, chest heaving, rifle hot in her hands. And then silence. Not the heavy, haunted silence she carried inside. Not the silence of grief. But the silence of survival. The stronghold still burned below, figures scattering, voices echoing faint. But they were alive. Barely. They collapsed into cover on the far side of the ridge, gasping, coughing dust from their lungs. Carter lay flat, staring at the sky. His voice shook. "We should have died." Martinez leaned against stone, face streaked with sweat and grit. "But we didn't." Alvarez sat apart, rifle across her knees, the fire in her chest raging. Because for the first time she had broken her silence. She had spoken. She had told Carter he wasn't alone. And she had felt the truth of it. Her hand brushed her jacket, the letter folded inside. Miguel's words echoed louder than ever. "Let someone else hold a piece of it." She looked at Martinez. His eyes were closed, but his chest heaved with exhaustion, his hands still gripping the rifle as if letting go meant death. She looked at Carter. His shoulders rose and fell, trembling, but his lips moved silently, whispering something, maybe a prayer, maybe nothing at all. And for the first time, Alvarez thought, maybe she could share it. Maybe she had to. Night fell hard on the cliffs. The team huddled in darkness, two spent asleep, two shaken to sleep. Alvarez lay awake, staring at the stars. The fire inside her no longer felt like something she had to carry alone, but letting it go, letting it belong to someone else, still terrified her. Her hand rested against her jacket, over Miguel's letter. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She whispered into the cold night air, so soft no one could hear. "Sometimes I don't know if I'm strong enough." The wind carried no answer. But for the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone in the silence. The fire never truly went out. Alvarez woke to the sound of wind scraping over stone. Her body ached from the climb, bruises sharp under her armor, lungs still raw from the dust of the stronghold. She sat up against the ridge wall, rifle resting across her lap, eyes searching the horizon. The valley below lay quiet. Smoke curled from shattered bunkers, the wreckage of the ambush scattered across the cliffs. A broken silence hung over it all, the silence of aftermath, not of peace. Martinez stirred beside her, his face drawn and pale, but his hand still gripped his weapon even in sleep. Carter lay stretched out further down, chest rising unevenly, lips moving faint with whispered words. Alive barely. Alvarez exhaled. Relief burned almost as hot as guilt. The radio crackled at dawn. Martinez snapped awake, fumbling for the headset, voice hoarse. "Echo team, report." Static hiss, then a fractured reply. "Copy, stronghold hit, reinforcements inbound. Hold position until extraction." Martinez's jaw set. Extraction. His eyes flicked to Alvarez. "That means more birds, more noise, they'll track it." She knew he was right. The enemy wouldn't leave the stronghold unanswered. Silence pressed heavy again. Not just the silence inside her, but the silence of an army regrouping, moving unseen. Carter sat up, his voice cracking. "We won't survive another fight." Alvarez met his eyes. "Then we don't wait for it." Martinez gave her a long look, measuring, then nodded once. "Move at dusk, quiet, through the ravine." The choice was made. They descended into the ravine as night bled across the cliffs. The path was narrow, shadowed by high stone walls, moonlight spilling faint silver over their helmets. Every step crunched against loose rock, echoing too loud in the confined space. Alvarez led, rifle raised, eyes sweeping the dark. Carter stumbled behind, his exhaustion pulling at every step, but he kept moving. Martinez stayed close, steady as a wall, his silence speaking more than words. The ravine curved, twisted, tightened. Every turn felt like a trap. And then the silence broke. A flare burst overhead, painting the stone blood red. Shouts rang from above. Shadows moved on the ridge. The enemy had found them. Gunfire rained down, sparks slicing the dark. The team dove against the ravine wall, pinned in the narrow pass. Bullets chipped stone inches from their heads. "Trapped," Carter's voice cracked. Martinez slammed a fresh mag into his rifle. "We fight." Alvarez's heart hammered. The ravine was a death box, no cover, no escape, unless... Her eyes caught a fracture in the stone wall, a jagged climb leading to a narrow shelf above. Dangerous, exposed, but higher ground. "Up there," she shouted, "now." Martinez's eyes followed hers. He nodded, then shoved Carter toward the wall. "Climb." Bullets screamed around them as Carter clawed for the ledge, boots slipping, hands bleeding against rock. Alvarez fired cover, steady, precise. Martinez climbed next, teeth bared against strain, dragging Carter upward with brute strength. Alvarez followed last, hands burning, shoulders screaming. A round grazed her arm, fire searing through muscle, but she didn't stop. She pulled herself onto the ledge, chest heaving, blood hot down her sleeve. They were higher now, not safe but higher. From the shelf, the view of the ravine spread wide, shadows of enemy soldiers moving below, rifles flashing. Martinez pressed to the rock, firing sharp bursts. They'll climb after us. Carter's breath broke. We can't outlast them. Alvarez's silence burned like a weight. The fire inside her roared, begging to be heard. She raised her rifle scope, catching the faint gleam of an enemy officer signaling from the ridge. Her pulse slowed. Her breath froze. She fired. The officer fell. For a heartbeat, confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Their fire faltered, voices clashing in chaos. Martinez seized it. Move along the shelf. They ran, bodies scraping against stone, boots sliding on gravel, the ravine stretching dark ahead. Bullets chased them, but the confusion gave them seconds. And in war, seconds were life. The shelf led them to a break in the cliffs, a narrow opening spilling onto open ground. The night air hit like ice. The valley stretched before them, black and endless. Carter collapsed to his knees, gasping, We made it." But Alvarez knew better. She could feel it, the silence waiting. And then it came. A single shot cracked the night. Carter jerked, eyes wide, blood blooming across his chest. Alvarez's scream tore the silence apart. She dropped beside him, hands pressing against the wound, blood hot and slick between her fingers. "Stay with me," her voice shook. "You're not alone, do you hear me? You're not alone." His eyes flickered, lips trembling, his hand grasped weakly at hers. "I know." And then his chest stilled. The silence swallowed him whole. Martinez's shout cut through her grief. "Sniper, move!" Rounds cracked the air, tearing earth around them. Alvarez's body moved on instinct, dragging herself behind stone, rifle snapping up, rage flooding her veins. Her scope found the glint of glass on the far ridge. She didn't breathe, didn't blink. She fired. The glint vanished. But the silence didn't. By dawn, they were still alive. Martinez and Alvarez crouched in the shadows of the valley, bodies trembling, eyes hollow. Carter's absence was a weight neither spoke of but both carried. The extraction came, helicopters cutting low, blades thundering. Martinez waved the signal, his face a mask of exhaustion. Alvarez didn't move. She stood in the valley, staring at the cliffs, the silence pressing tighter and tighter around her. She had spoken, she had broken her silence for Carter, and it hadn't saved him. Martinez's voice reached her, rough, heavy. "Alvarez, time to go." Her eyes burned, her chest ached, but she turned, she walked, she climbed into the helicopter. The rotors lifted them into the sky, the valley shrinking below, the cliffs fading into shadow. But inside, the fire still raged. Because silence wasn't gone, it never would be. Later, when the base lights glowed warm against night, Alvarez sat alone on a cot, Miguel's letter open in her hands. The words blurred through her tears. "You don't have to carry it alone." But she was alone. Martinez had his own silence. Carter was buried now. And hers had only grown. She folded the letter, pressed it back against her chest. Her whisper broke into the dark. "Then why does it feel like I always will?" No one answered. The silence held her. The fire remained.